All right, the holidays will soon be over and you may have some Christmas money to spend. And you may possibly be looking to get into the market of the external module experience for your FPV gear. Well, it's been a while since I've updated the tests on, latency end to end, all that kind of statistics. We'll get into it here in a second. For all the different module types, we're talking Crossfire, we're talking Tracer, we're talking ExpressLRS, we're talking Ghost, we're talking R9, all those things that you can see right over here. We have some new firmware updates that have just been released. We've got ExpressLRS 2.0. We have Ghost on their latest stable 1.0.5.0 and Tracer on 6.13 release. So how do those stack up with all the statistics, and what is the best modules that you should be looking at for this upcoming FPV season? So there's three things to consider when you're looking at radio connection from your controller to your FPV drone. The one is range, just how far the transmitting protocol can go. And the other two things are end-to-end latency and jitter. Now, in the order of importance, and it's going to vary opinion-based, but just being engaged on the firmware development side, I would say jitter is the number one thing that we want to keep low in our radio signal. That really has to deal with the quality of the firmware and hardware that's being utilized in the modules themselves and so on and so forth. If you have a transmission that can go really far or has a really low end-to-end latency but has tons of jitter, it's a crappy signal. And jitter basically means the timing of the signal of when it's going through the air. Imagine you have a nice steady signal that's low jitter, but if you have a signal that's being transmitted as you're moving your sticks and it's jumping all over the place, that's a lot of jitter. That has to be smoothed out in the firmware. Now, Betaflight and other firmware can smooth out that signal. They have filters, there's jitter control. You'll see in Betaflight 4.3, there's a jitter element there that you can increase the number or decrease. But smoothing out signals always adds more latency. So if you have to do a lot of smoothing to smooth out a jittery signal, well, then it kind of kills your end-to-end latency anyways. So that gets to the next thing. There's inherent just end-to-end latency in every different motor protocol. So that means after I move the sticks, how long does it take after I move the sticks for that signal to actually get to the receiver? And then the third thing is just penetration through objects or just overall long range distance. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about the two things that are hardest to measure, which is jitter and end-to-end latency from when you're moving the sticks till that signal gets all the way to the receiver. If this is your first time being introduced to this testing, I have an ESP module here that I can connect. This has a receiver on it. You can see the receiver hanging off right here. And I have this that you can connect this to the transmitter. So it actually tells the transmitter when to send a signal and then measures when it's being received by the receiver, and so it knows when it's being sent and when it's being received. So you have the end-to-end. That's going through OpenTX and the motherboard and everything that's in here. It's actually wired directly to the throttle gimbal, so it's just overriding the throttle gimbal. It's basically like pulsing the throttle here. And in a part of that, it's also measuring the jitter in the signal. Now, of course, I'd be remiss to give credit where credit's due. This process for doing this testing and the firmware to do it comes through the ExpressLRS project. Alessandro developed all this and helped me through getting all this set up. And if you haven't seen this sheet before, what we have here is three basic sections. Right here on the left, you will see this is the average end-to-end latency in milliseconds. So that's 1/1000th of a second. 1 millisecond is 1/1000th of a second. And you can see the different modules here stacked up on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, this is where we have the packet jitter measurement. And again, the protocols and modules here are stacked up on the right-hand side. And this is, again, measuring jitter. So we're trying to get the smoothest line possible here, like we talked about, because then it doesn't really require hardly any filtering. Whereas if it's very jiggity-jag line, you got to filter that stuff down. Now, listed below the average end-to-end latency chart, we have the different firmware versions that we're looking at. And mainly for this update, I've done all these tests before and have a previous video. You can look through the data, or I'll make a link to that in the upper right. I didn't change all the firmware releases, but we did have some very big releases in ExpressLRS 2.01. They're actually on right now. And then Ghost has now their firmware in stable release, this 1.05.0. And then TBS Tracer is up to 6.13. Now, if you haven't noticed, there's a competition going on between ExpressLRS, Ghost, and TBS Tracer for the fastest, lowest latency link, best quality link out there. And this testing really gets to the heart of that. There was some confusion in the past, so I'm going to hopefully try to clear that up. But what this shows is out of 500 packets being transmitted, test with ExpressLRS, then a separate test with Ghost, then TBS Tracer. It shows how many packets out of the 500 were received between 4 to 5 milliseconds, 5 to 6 milliseconds here, and then 6 to 7. And then how many of those packets took end-to-end latency 3 to 4 milliseconds, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and then TBS Tracer 4 to 5, 5 to 6, you get the point. So you can see the tightness in distribution is really with ExpressLRS and Ghost. Tracer, that distribution of packet, the variability of those packets getting, how long they took to get, from the gimbal through the radio all the way to the receiver, it just had a wider distribution, more, one could say a more variable latency. Some packets took 8 milliseconds, a little, even some 13 took over 8 milliseconds to get there, but others took 4 milliseconds, half that time when you're talking Tracer. Whereas between ExpressLRS and Ghost, you're talking 4 to 5 milliseconds or 3 to 4. And also look here, the winner is Ghost. I mean, 3 to 4 milliseconds. Half the packets only took 3 to 4 milliseconds. The other half took 4 to 5. And ExpressLRS is awesome, but numbers are numbers. This was 4 to 5 and 5 to 6. So, we're talking an entire millisecond less. Not that, that whole millisecond is going to make or break you, but if you want to go by the numbers, who, made a really good system here to get the lowest possible end-to-end latency, it's Ghost. Now, there is two different things going on here with the over-air protocol. You can see that Ghost and TBS Tracer are both using the FLRC for their radio transmission across the air. So that's the same. One thing here to notice as well is Tracer has telemetry. So talked about that wider distribution, but you are getting telemetry back with that, where Ghost, you're not getting telemetry on this one. So you're giving that up. So do you need telemetry or not? Do you need the RSSI to be called out on your radio here, or to look down to that, or have the warnings come up if it's a little low, or can you just see that in the OSD goggles? It's really up to you. Kind of as a differentiator here, you can see ExpressLRS is using the LoRa over-the-air protocol, and again, telemetry is off. So between ExpressLRS and Ghost, to get that higher end-to-end latency, they're dropping off telemetry to get there. And there is a difference between ExpressLRS. LoRa should have higher sensitivity. LoRa should be able to go farther, have more penetration through walls. So you're getting that faster end-to-end latency with maybe a little bit higher penetration or distance with that. Whereas Ghost, you're getting even faster than ExpressLRS, but FLRC, you're not going to get as much penetration. Both ExpressLRS and Ghost, again, telemetry is off for these results, and with TBS Tracer, you are getting telemetry on with that, but a little bit wider distribution. Ho, but you might ask, well, Mark, why didn't you test it with telemetry on? What do you get with Ghost with telemetry on? Is it the same as Tracer now? Head to head, telemetry on? Yeah. What do you get? What do you get? Well, I did. Ghost has a ton of options. You have FLRC, you can do LoRa, you can do telemetry on, telemetry off. There's just a slew of options, and all those were tested here in this datasheet, which I will make a link down in the video description where you can download this and explore it for yourself. So you can see here, here's with FLRC telemetry on. Now with this, it is the 250 hertz packet rate, not the 500 hertz packet rate, but that's still faster than the TBS, but you can see then, the distribution's looking a little bit more same. Ghost is still doing a little bit better because it has the 3 to 4 millisecond packets here, 109 of them out of 500, whereas you don't have any of those with TBS Tracer, where you get up to the 8s Now this was 8 plus, so this is greater than 8. Here it only went up to 8. It didn't. I guess you had a couple. You had 8, or you had a couple here at 8 and 9, where this says it's kind of you're getting close to the same. This had 13. This has only had a couple. So you're really close there between the two when you're turning telemetry on. Now, when it comes to ExpressLRS, you can have telemetry on here as well, even for this, ultra fast, low latency signal. But it does come as a sacrifice because you do get some more jitter. So let's go look at the jitter comparisons. Okay, so here we're again looking at jitter. This is, 500 samples going across the bottom here. Now this is the packet interval on the left-hand side in microseconds. So 2000 microseconds is 2 milliseconds. So this is 2 milliseconds, 2.1 milliseconds, 2.3 milliseconds, so on and so forth. And then 2 milliseconds equates to 500 hertz. So when you look over here and you see this ExpressLRS, 500 hertz signal right there, well, that's going to equate to 2 millisecond packet intervals, and in this case we're showing this is 2000 microseconds. But you can see here they're not all 2000 microsecond packet interval. Some of those jump up and a packet's missed or it's way longer. And this is not a missed like it didn't get through the wall. This was here on the bench, so it's not, there's no interference. It just missed or it took a little long to get there. Why is that? Well, I don't really know about these little jogs in here. It's some jitter. These bigger ones here are indicative of just a skip packet. This probably jumps all the way up to 4 milliseconds or 4,000 microseconds. But the big takeaway here again, as you can see, the Ghost 500 is a very smooth packet interval across, and that is with sync on. So what is sync? So we have frequency hopping radios, meaning on the 2.4 gigahertz band, the frequency is jumping around, and then the transmitter and the receiver are both jumping together, and you have multiple, so you don't get interference, or if somebody turns on or one band of the frequency gets interference, you're not on it very long, so it just hops to another frequency and you don't lose radio control. When I first started doing RC flying, you used to have pins. You were on that one specific frequency. If somebody turned on and stepped on that, you're going to lose your link. Well, that doesn't happen anymore with frequency hopping. However, that jumping around of frequency needs to be synced between the two. So one of the things that ExpressLRS does to get its ultra low jitter, signal is that when you arm, it stops doing the syncing. So if you have a micro failsafe, you're not gonna have a micro failsafe. If it failsafes at all, it's going to totally failsafe until you disarm it, and then it will actually pick up and synchronize that hopping again and then reconnect the transmitter receiver. So in the data you see here that I just showed, this data right here, that's with sync off. So if I would have a micro fail, well, you're not going to have a micro failsafe. It failsafes at all. It's just going to lose it altogether until I would disarm, and then it would sync back up, and then hopefully I can arm that again. With Ghost, that's not an option. You can't turn sync off. So that data that Ghost is getting here, that's with sync on. Whereas the ExpressLRS down here, that's with sync off. And Ghost is doing pretty good there. So switching this up here and putting in the data, because I did run it with sync on and sync off. So basically you run the test with it armed, and then you run the test with it disarmed, and the module does its thing, and I can get it both ways. So dumping that data in here, you can see this is now ExpressLRS with sync on. Now the sync packets are pretty far apart, so it's not interrupting all that much, but you can see there is more interruption. So this is more head-to-head. This is Ghost 500, ExpressLRS 500. Both have telemetry off, both have sync on, and Ghost has lower jitter. Now, I have to say that, how important this is for the absolute lowest amount of jitter, that is going to be debatable. And that is not what this testing is about. At the end of the day, there's kind of a competition going on here, and these are the numbers. This is the results we're getting. I think it depends on what side folks are on, if they'll say certain things important or not, right? If you're the radio link with the least amount of jitter, you're going to be like, oh, that's the most important thing. But if you're the radio link that then switches around and or whatever, then you don't have it. You say, oh, well, it's not that really important anymore. Now this is important. So, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just presenting the results that I'm seeing here and trying to clear up any confusion. Now, one big part of the confusion I want to clear up definitely is that, you know, Tracer's not really in the running here for this low latency stuff and jitter. You can see between ExpressLRS and Ghost, Tracer's up here, your 4 millisecond packets, not 2 millisecond packets, which is fine, but the amount of jitter, there's a lot more jitter on Tracer versus Ghost or ExpressLRS. So I would say the two that are really, kind of neck and neck is Ghost and ExpressLRS. And I would say as of right now, Ghost is, edged a little bit forward. ExpressLRS has awesome, compelling features. I know the guys at ExpressLRS, and I'm an open source guy, so this is one of these moments that I hope there's no blowback, but the numbers are the numbers. I love Alessandro, I love Wes, love all the guys, love what ExpressLRS is doing. But if Ghost is doing good performance like they are here, I think they're due their shining light as well. Thing you can do in Betaflight 4.3 that you could not do before is you can go into black box logging and turn on the RX timing debug mode, and of course you can log that. But the other thing, if you don't want to do logging, you can just, with that enabled, go into the sensors tab and you can see the output right here. Now, keeping in mind that in the sensors tab here, you're only seeing the data every 10 milliseconds, which black box logging is much more refined and accurate than that. You're seeing, the data every 8,000 times per second or 2,000 times per second. It depends on your logging rate. Here at 10 milliseconds, it's way spaced out. Now, another neat thing you can do is go into the CLI and set your black box mode to motor test. And then from there, go into motors tab. You can check this on here. Now, I don't even have a battery plugged in, but now when I arm the quad, it is going to start logging. So in this log right here, you can see, this was just a couple seconds of me doing that test. And on this side here, this is where I don't have telemetry on at all. This is telemetry at 1 to 128. And then you can see the sync packets here. These are the sync packets right here. And then this is 1 to 64, 1 to 32, and then I think I went down to 1 to 8, and then you can see everything that's going on there. So yeah, you start turning on telemetry with Express, and then you're going to start to get a lot more jumping of those frame intervals. It's very, it's by design. It's not messy code or anything. It's just they got to send the data back at some point in time. But that said, looking at Ghost, they're at race 250 with telemetry on. You can see it's this gray line that's actually behind it, or the pure race. Now, pure race is telemetry off, so we're really looking at this race 250 with telemetry on. And you can see there's no spikes in that gray line back there behind that blue that jump up. So they're able to send telemetry packets, but not having these big spikes in frame interval with Ghost. Now, you're not getting the 500 hertz. You're more up here like 4 millisecond frames instead of the 2 millisecond frames, but nevertheless, and then you can see that populate all the way up through with Ghost. Even in their long range here as well, you're not getting any big packet jumps. So I gotta say, Ghost, is kind of really crushing it with telemetry on, telemetry off. Doesn't matter how you slice it. They really have a low jitter signal, and it doesn't have jumps in packet rates. Whereas ExpressLRS, you can get definitely that really low jitter amount, but you just not have telemetry on, or you're going to get those spikes and jumps. And you also need to have sync off as well, which with Ghost, their sync is on all the time. So yeah. There's other things to consider. Obviously, ExpressLRS is an open source project, so if you're in support and really supportive of open source, maybe that's the way you go. And those guys are continuing to develop new cool features that go into the firmware. On the other side of that, Ghost has over-the-air updates, just like TBS Crossfire. Or on the flip side, if you're all in the TBS ecosystem with Crossfire, then Tracer may be it for you. But I do want to be clear that when it comes to stats on jitter, end-to-end latency, it's really Ghost is the number one, then ExpressLRS, and then tracer is third. But what do you think? Drop your comments down below on what you think are the most important factors. Thanks everybody, and I hope this helped.